My coworker framed me for $5,000 theft, got me fired, and thought she'd won. 7 years later, I watched her walk into an interview where I was the boss, and let's just say, karma clocked in on time. Hey Reddit, so this one's been sitting in the back of my mind for years, and I figured it's finally time to share it. Let's just say I used to work with someone who made my life hell, got me fired for something I didn't do, and thought she'd gotten away with it. She didn't. What happened next is probably the longest, coldest revenge I've ever been part of. You know those jobs that somehow feel less like work and more like a weird extended family reunion? That was my first job at a business company, let's call it Company A. 10 of us total, stuffed into a small building that somehow ran smoother than half the big-name companies in the city. We worked long hours, sometimes too long, but it never felt unbearable because everyone pulled their weight. Our boss, Mike, was one of those rare people who made you forget he owned the place. He'd roll up his sleeves, grab a coffee, and work next to you if things got hectic. No corporate nonsense, no empty speeches, just real leadership. You didn't see that kind of thing anymore. I still remember the rent story. I was in my mid-20s, and rent had just gone up. I was short by $200, trying to figure out how to stretch canned soup into 3 meals. Mike must have noticed something was off because he called me into his office one day, pretending it was about an invoice. Instead, he slid an envelope across the desk and said, "You've earned it, kid. Don't worry about it." No lecture, no guilt trip. Just quiet help. I didn't even ask how he knew. That's just the kind of guy he was. The longer I stayed, the more I started to feel like this was it. This was my place. But at some point, comfort turns into a cage. As good as things were, I kept hitting the same wall. I'd see management positions open up, but without a degree, I wasn't even considered. Mike wasn't the type to play favorites. He followed the books. I respected that, but it stung. I wanted more out of life than clocking in and out forever. One night after work, I stayed late organizing invoices. Mike was in his office doing whatever bosses do when they don't want to go home yet. When I was done, I knocked on his door. "Got a minute?" He looked up, smiled like he always did. "What's up, kid?" I told him everything. How I appreciated the job, how much the company meant to me, but that I felt stuck. I said I wanted to go to university, get a degree in business administration, try to make something more out of myself. There was a long pause where I half expected him to talk me out of it. Instead, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "You know, I was wondering when you'd say that." I laughed, confused. "You were?" "Yeah," he said. "You're smart. You've got a sharp brain and a mouth that never stops moving. If you don't use that somewhere bigger, you'll get bored here. Go get your degree. This place isn't going anywhere." I stood there, not sure what to say. I'd worked there so long that quitting almost felt like betrayal. "I just don't want to leave you hanging," I said. He waved his hand. "We'll manage. You go do what you need to do. When you finish that degree, come back if you want. There'll always be a spot for you here." That was Mike. No guilt trip, no drama, just support. Most bosses barely remember your name. He remembered your dreams. On my last day, Mike shook my hand and said, "You'll figure it out. You always do." I told myself it was the right move. Education, experience, new opportunities. You know, all that motivational poster stuff. But here's the thing about life. It doesn't care how nice your boss was or how well you planned. It has a funny way of flipping the table just when you think you're ready for the next step. Still, walking away that day, I didn't feel scared, just determined. I promised myself I'd come back one day. Not because I needed to, but because I'd earned my spot at the table for real this time. What I didn't know was that by the time I did come back, I wouldn't just be an employee again. I'd be the guy serving up karma with a side of satisfaction. At least, that's what I like to tell myself now. Back then, I was just a broke student with a backpack full of textbooks and a part-time job at my new company. We'll call it Company B, a place that could make a prison cafeteria look like Disneyland. It was supposed to be temporary, just a way to pay rent while I finished my degree. But temporary turned into 7 years, mostly because life doesn't really care about your plans when you're counting pennies for groceries. Company B was massive, about 50 employees, which sounds good until you realize that half of them quit every few months. The first week, my supervisor handed me a neon vest and said, "Try not to get crushed." That was the training. They didn't believe in breaks. Seriously, if you stopped moving for more than 3 minutes, someone would hunt you. I remember once leaning against a crate to stretch my back, and before I even blinked, the shift lead shouted, "You alive or what? We're behind." Bathroom breaks were a gamble. The second I shut the stall door, someone would bang on it like I was smuggling diamonds in there. "You done yet? We need you back." The kind of place where taking a breath was treated like theft. I stuck it out because tuition wasn't going to pay itself. I'd come home dead tired, microwave whatever cheap meal I could afford, and crash. Repeat. It wasn't glamorous, but I kept telling myself it was temporary. Then came H. She'd been one of my best friends from high school. She called me one night saying she'd been laid off and couldn't find anything. I told her, look, this place isn't heaven, but it's money. I'll put in a word. A week later, she was hired. I don't know who was luckier, her for getting the job or me for having a sane person to talk to. We started carpooling, having lunch together, and basically trying to keep each other from losing our minds. She called it survival by friendship. She wasn't wrong. The years rolled on like that. I worked, studied, worked some more. I climbed from part-time grunt to full-time, and when my degree was finally in my hands, it felt like all those nights of eating noodles and dodging managers had actually been worth something. Not long after, a position opened for warehouse supervisor. I applied, got interviewed, and to my shock, actually landed it. Finally, my own office, a glorified broom closet with a desk, but it was mine. My name was on the schedule under supervisor, and for once, people had to report to me. Things finally looked stable. H was still there, working in another department, but always dropping by to talk. We'd joke about how someday we'd both quit and start our own business. I didn't know it then, but that job was about to introduce me to the one person who'd make me seriously consider early retirement. Enter Witch. Yeah, that's what I called her. Everyone did. Not to her face, of course, but it fit too perfectly. She showed up one Monday as a cashier, freshly hired, all smiles, fake laugh, and perfume that could knock out a horse. The kind of person who acted like the world owed her a parade for showing up to work on time. At first, I didn't pay much attention. She wasn't my problem. I ran the warehouse, not the front end. But within weeks, she somehow managed to crawl her way up the ladder. Suddenly, she was helping with sales, assisting the manager, and showing up in meetings she wasn't even supposed to be in. It didn't make sense. Most people worked their tails off for years to move up, and she was gliding through like she had cheat codes. One day, I came in early and saw her at the front desk chatting with the manager. I nodded hello, and she barely looked at me, like I was part of the furniture. A few minutes later, she strutted past me to the break room and started bragging to a group of new hires about how she was probably getting promoted soon. Promoted for what? Someone asked. She smirked and said, for being smarter than everyone else. That was my introduction to Witch. I tried not to care. I had enough work keeping the warehouse from falling apart, but it's hard to ignore someone who seems allergic to humility. Every time I passed her in the hall, she'd give me this look, like she was silently grading me and I'd failed the test. Still, I kept my head down. I was saving money, paying off school loans, and finally had some peace. Or at least I thought I did. At the time, Witch was just annoying background noise. But within a few months, she'd become the storm that wrecked everything I'd built. And if I'd known what was coming, I probably would have quit that day. But I didn't. Because I thought I could handle it. Turns out I was about to learn just how wrong I could be. Witch didn't waste time making herself known. Within a few months, she went from cashier to sales assistant to sitting in the manager's office like she owned the place. Nobody understood it, but we all had theories. The most popular one? Let's just say it didn't involve spreadsheets or sales reports. Every morning, she'd waltz in late, sunglasses on, holding a coffee like she'd just come from an important board meeting. 10, sometimes 20 minutes past her shift, she'd toss her purse down, smile at whoever dared look annoyed, and say, traffic was insane. Then, she'd disappear into the manager's office for hours. The manager, who was married by the way, didn't seem to mind. He'd close the blinds, and the two of them would stay in there laughing and discussing numbers. Everyone pretended not to notice because, well, rent isn't cheap, and jobs like this didn't come easy. The rumor mill spun nonstop, but no one was dumb enough to say anything out loud. Meanwhile, the rest of us were running around trying to keep the place from collapsing. It got worse. She'd show up to meetings she wasn't invited to, talk over people, and repeat what someone else said, just louder, like it was her idea. Once I gave a presentation about reorganizing shipment routes to cut costs. She interrupted halfway through, repeated my exact suggestion, and the manager said, "That's a great idea, Witch." I just sat there thinking, you've got to be effing kidding me. One day we had a huge truck delivery, short-staffed and already behind schedule. I asked her if she could send a few people from sales to help unload, just for an hour. She crossed her arms, looked me up and down, and said, "That's not really my job. My department has more important things to handle." "Yeah," I said. "Like sitting in the manager's office?" She gasped like I'd insulted the queen. "Excuse me?" I said, "I'll handle it," I replied quickly, before I said something that'd get me fired. That day, I unloaded the truck with just 2 guys. By the time we finished, my shirt looked like I'd gone swimming in it. Witch strutted past, heels clicking, holding her phone up to her ear like she was making $1 million deal. She didn't even look at us. It wasn't just me she treated like that. She'd pick random coworkers to blame for mistakes that weren't theirs, then smile in their faces the next day like nothing happened. HR practically had her name engraved on their door, but somehow every complaint vanished into thin air. One morning, I came in 5 minutes late. 5. I clocked in and got pulled aside by payroll later that week. "You were late Monday," they said. "We're deducting an hour." An hour. For 5 minutes. Meanwhile, Witch showed up almost every day after me, and not a single thing ever appeared on her timesheet. I didn't even bother arguing. I just said, "Guess I should start wearing perfume and walking slower." They didn't laugh. By that point, my team started joking that Witch was the real manager. She had the attitude, the access, and the favoritism to prove it. But the joke stopped being funny when it started costing me. A couple of my warehouse guys came to me one day looking nervous. "Hey man," one of them said quietly, "you might want to watch your back." Witch was in the break room talking about how the warehouse keeps screwing up deliveries. I frowned. "We haven't had a late delivery in months." "Yeah, but she told the manager it's because you don't check the orders right." I felt my blood boil. Of course she did. That same week, she started dropping into my department, nitpicking random things she didn't understand. "Why are these boxes stacked like this?" she'd say, pointing at a perfectly organized pile. "You should be following my system." "What system?" I'd ask. "The one I'm working on," she'd say, and walk off. The woman was like a mosquito that wore heels and perfume. Impossible to ignore and impossible to squash. It wasn't long before the tension between us became public. She'd glare at me during meetings, interrupt my reports, and roll her eyes whenever I spoke. I didn't let her intimidate me. If anything, I leaned into it. I'd start presentations with, "All right, Witch, you ready to take notes?" The look she gave me could have melted steel. Everyone noticed. The warehouse guys were on my side. Most of the sales team couldn't stand her. But none of that mattered. She had the manager wrapped around her finger, and that made her untouchable. I didn't know when or how, but she was planning something. You could see it in the way she smirked when she walked past my office. And deep down, I knew she'd strike eventually. I just didn't expect her to aim straight for my career. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were usually chaos. New shipments, rush orders, everyone moving like the world was ending. That morning, a delivery came in marked URGENT, handle with care. Inside was an antique collector's set worth over $5,000, the kind of thing you'd be scared to even breathe near. I'd set up a system years ago for handling expensive items. Double verification, paperwork, and immediate lockup. No exceptions. The final step was always a handoff to the designated safe custodian, who had to sign and timestamp receipt before it left my responsibility. In this case, that custodian was Witch. I checked the set myself, logged it, had 2 coworkers verify the contents, and walked it straight to her desk with the paperwork in hand. She was on her phone, laughing about something that definitely wasn't work-related. "Hey," I said calmly, "we've got the antique set in. I just need your signature and for you to lock it up when you get a minute." She barely looked up. "Just leave it there." I hesitated. "It's worth over $5,000. I'd feel better if it went straight in now in front of me." That got her attention. She dropped her phone, gave me this sharp, irritated look, and snapped, "Don't tell me how to do my job. I know how to handle inventory." I bit my tongue. She finally scribbled her signature on the log, half-hearted, but enough to prove the transfer, and waved me off. I set the box on her desk and said, "All right, it's all logged and verified. Please make sure it's locked up." She gave me that fake smile, the one that always made my skin crawl. "I'll handle it." I left, annoyed but relieved to be done with it. I figured it was just another day of dealing with her attitude. I had no idea I'd just handed her the bullet she'd used to shoot my job down. The next morning, I walked in and something felt off. The manager's door was open, HR was already there, and Witch was sitting across from them, pretending to look distressed. She had that perfect mix of fake sadness and victim face. My stomach sank. "Can you step in for a moment?" the manager said. His tone was cold. Too cold. I sat down, already feeling the tension. "What's going on?" He slid an empty box across the desk. The same box I'd delivered to Witch's desk yesterday. "The antique set is missing." I froze. "What do you mean missing?" "It was supposed to be in the safe," he said, glaring. "Witch opened the box this morning to prepare it for pickup, and it was empty." I blinked, confused. "No, that's impossible." I checked it myself, sealed it, and handed it directly to her. Which sniffled dramatically. He's lying. When he brought it to me, the box was already light. I even asked him if everything was inside, and he said it was fine. I turned to her. That's not what happened, and you know it. She shook her head, pretending to look hurt. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to take the blame for something I didn't do. The HR rep cleared her throat. Do we have camera footage? The manager sighed. The system's been down for a few days. It's under maintenance. Of course it was. So there I was. No proof, no video, just my word against hers. I explained every step I took, every document signed, even offered to show timestamps. The manager didn't care. He leaned back in his chair and said, I knew you'd be trouble one day. You always think you're smarter than everyone else. That hit me like a punch. Trouble? I've been running this warehouse for years. Half your sales depend on what I do down there. He stood up. And yet, somehow a $5,000 set went missing right after it left your hands. Do you expect me to believe that's a coincidence? Witch piped up softly. Maybe he just made a mistake. All people do. Her tone was syrupy sweet, fake concern dripping from every word. I swear if HR hadn't been sitting there, I might have laughed. She was enjoying this. Every second of it. Gosh, I wanted to punch her so bad. After a painfully long discussion, they asked us both to step out while they talked. I waited in the hallway, pacing, my heart pounding. 15 minutes later, the door opened. Can you come in? The manager said. I walked in, hoping for logic, maybe even fairness. Instead, he handed me a termination letter. You're responsible for the item at the time of its disappearance. We have to let you go. I stared at the paper like it was written in another language. You're firing me? Based on nothing? He didn't even look up. You're lucky we're not pressing charges. I felt like someone pulled the ground out from under me. Just like that, 7 years of work. Gone. I gathered my stuff in silence, every eye in the warehouse on me. He ran up asking what happened. I just shook my head. They said I lost it. Which won? Her jaw tightened. She didn't win. Not yet. I forced a small smile, but inside, I was wrecked. I walked out with a cardboard box under my arm, past the same doors I'd walked through 1,000 times. Only this time, they shut behind me like a cell door. I sat in my car for a long time, just staring at the building. All I could think was how fast everything flipped. One day, I was running a department. The next, I was branded a thief. And which? She stood by the window of the office, smiling down at me. I don't know if she meant for me to see her, but I did. And that smug grin. That was her gotcha moment. If I'd had any doubts before, they were gone now. She'd done it on purpose. And she thought she'd gotten away with it. But here's the thing about people like her. They always forget one thing. Even the best lies eventually come back around. At least, that's what I kept telling myself while I watched job after job slip through my fingers. After getting fired, I spent weeks applying everywhere. Warehouses, logistics, even a couple of office admin jobs I was overqualified for. At first, interviews went great. People seemed interested, impressed even. Then came the background checks. Every single time, the same pattern. Silence, then a polite rejection email. It didn't take a genius to figure out why. Company B had basically labeled me a thief. Nobody wanted to hire the guy who lost a $5,000 item. My name might as well have been stamped with do not trust. I tried not to get bitter, but it's hard when you know the real criminal is still out there smiling behind her desk, probably bragging about her promotion. Bills were stacking up. My savings were thinning. One night, while scrolling job listings that all started to blur together, I saw a posting that made me stop cold. Company A, hiring manager position. It felt like the world paused for a second. My old home. My first real job. The place that taught me how to do things right. But my stomach twisted when I thought about calling. What if they'd heard the rumors too? What if my name was already tainted beyond repair? Still, I had nothing left to lose. So I picked up the phone. When Mike, my old boss, answered, his voice sounded exactly the same. Warm, calm, like nothing had changed. Hey kid! Been a long time. What's going on? I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him everything. From getting hired at Company B, to Witch's setup, to walking out with my box of things while she watched. I half expected him to be disappointed. Instead, he just sighed and said, I believe you. That hit me harder than I expected. He continued, You know, Company B's got a bad rep around here. Nothing official, but there have been some questionable stories floating around. Never had proof, but smoke usually means fire. So it's not just me? I asked. He laughed softly. Kid, I've been in this business 30 years. I've seen plenty of companies like that. Don't worry. Karma's got a long memory. It'll catch up to them. Then he paused and said, "Actually, your timing's perfect. Our manager's retiring next month. You want the spot?" I thought he was joking. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. You've earned it. Come home." For the first time in months, I felt my chest loosen. "Yeah," I said. "I'd love to." "Good," he said. "And don't worry about what happened over there. We know who you are." When I hung up, I sat there for a minute just staring at the phone. It didn't erase what happened, but for once, the world didn't feel like it was against me. The first week back at Company A felt like walking into sunlight after living underground. I didn't realize how much I'd missed it until I was there again. No shouting, no backstabbing, no fake smiles. Just people doing their jobs. Mike trained me for a few weeks, handed over his notes, and said, "You've got this." I took the position officially 2 weeks later. Manager. The title I'd once wanted so bad it hurt. Still, some nights I'd think about what happened. About Witch. About how she'd smirked while I was getting fired. It bothered me. Not because I wanted revenge, but because she was still out there ruining lives without consequence. Or so I thought. Then one afternoon, a few weeks into my new job, my phone buzzed. It was H. She sounded calm. Almost too calm. "Hey, you busy?" "Kinda, but what's up?" I said, glancing at the pile of invoices on my desk. "I just wanted to say, don't worry about anything," she said. "Anything?" I asked. "That's a big category." She laughed. "You'll see soon enough." "Wait, what are you doing?" "Nothing illegal," she said, which coming from H could mean just about anything. "H," I said, suspicious. "Please tell me you're not about to set the building on fire." "No fire," she said. "Just trust me." I leaned back in my chair. "You sound like you're planning a heist." "Let's call it justice," she replied. "Anyway, gotta go. Talk soon." The call ended before I could press her for details. I sat there staring at my phone, confused but smiling. Whatever she was up to, it had that familiar tone. Quiet confidence mixed with mischief. H wasn't the type to act without purpose. I didn't know it then, but that call was the start of the storm. Which had no idea was coming. While I was rebuilding my life, H was quietly pulling threads behind the scenes. And those threads? They were about to unravel everything Witch thought she'd gotten away with. I didn't know any of this at the time, of course. I was busy running things at Company A, trying to keep my head down and rebuild what Witch had taken from me. Then one evening, H called me again, voice calm but with that same mischievous spark she always had. "You remember how I said not to worry?" she asked. "Yeah," I said cautiously. "You planning to tell me what that meant yet?" "I will," she said. "But first, just promise me you won't freak out when you hear what I've done." "H," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You can't start a sentence like that unless you're about to confess to something insane." She laughed. "Relax. I didn't break any laws. I just played the long game. I didn't understand until she told me everything. Apparently, after I got fired, H stayed at Company B. She knew Witch had set me up. She'd been there long enough to recognize how Witch worked. But she also knew that going after her right away wouldn't do anything. Witch had the manager in her pocket, and half the office scared of her. So H did what I never could. She made Witch think she'd won. H started small. Compliments, small talk, pretending to admire her leadership. She'd walk by Witch's desk and say things like, "You're really good at handling the manager. I don't know how you do it." And Witch? She ate it up. That woman lived off attention like plants need sunlight. Every bit of fake flattery made her glow brighter and get sloppier. Within a few weeks, H was part of Witch's circle. They'd eat lunch together, gossip about coworkers, even text after work. Witch started treating her like a trusted friend. H said it made her stomach turn most days, but she kept it up. The act went on for weeks. Witch would brag about how important she was, how the manager couldn't make a decision without her. She'd talk about how she was going to restructure the sales department, even though nobody had asked her to. Then came the real setup. After nearly 5 months of fake friendship, H casually suggested they hang out outside of work. "You've been stressed," she said to Witch. "Why don't you come over? We'll have some drinks, unwind a bit." Witch agreed instantly, probably thinking she'd found another person to worship her. H told me later that when the night came, everything was perfect. Her husband set up a small hidden recorder on a shelf, just in case. State law allows a participant to record. I didn't expect her to say anything, H admitted. I just wanted backup if she tried to twist something. But Witch didn't need much prompting. After a few hours, she was in full brag mode. She'd always loved talking about herself, but that night, she went all in. According to H, Witch leaned back on the couch, laughing, and said, "You know, I still can't believe how stupid everyone was. I had that place wrapped around my finger." H played along. "You really did. Nobody could touch you." Exactly, Witch said, swirling her drink. Even when I stole that antique set, they blamed him. H said she almost dropped her glass. Wait, what? She asked, pretending to be shocked. Witch smirked. Please. That guy, Mr. Perfect, was getting too comfortable, always walking around like he ran the place. So I taught him a lesson. Cameras were down. Manager believed every word I said. I told him the box came to me empty, and boom, he was gone. He kept her tone light. Wow, you're bold. Bold, Witch laughed. Smart. I knew he'd get the blame, and it worked. I got promoted, got a raise, and the idiot's probably flipping burgers somewhere. H's husband told me later he had to bite his tongue not to react while recording. But Witch wasn't done. She leaned forward and whispered like she was sharing a secret. You want to know the best part? The manager? He wasn't just helping me out. Let's just say his wife didn't know how many late nights at work he had. H said she smiled politely, though inside she was screaming. You mean, you two? Witch grinned proudly. Oh yeah, that's how you get what you deserve. Men like him are easy to control if you make them feel important. He gave me everything I wanted. By that point, H didn't need to ask more. Witch had buried herself deep enough. The next morning, H and her husband drove straight to the police station. They turned in the recording, along with a statement detailing everything Witch had confessed. H even brought copies of shipment logs from the day of the missing set, proof that I'd followed every step correctly. That afternoon, police showed up at Company B. Witch tried to act calm, but witnesses said her face turned pale when they asked to search her house. And she actually agreed, probably thinking she could talk her way out of it. Bad move. They found the collector's set still in its box, tucked away in a closet like some kind of trophy, too traceable to sell. She was arrested on the spot. When I got the call from H that night, I was speechless. I think all I said was, "You're kidding." Nope, she said cheerfully. Our favorite witch just got broomed out of the building. I couldn't stop laughing. It wasn't just relief, it was justice. Real, undeniable justice. I told H she was insane for pulling that off. She said, "You'd have done the same for me." She wasn't wrong. That night, I sat back, closed my eyes, and just let it sink in. The lies that destroyed my career were finally catching up to the person who told them. And this time, there was no escape for her. Witch's confession spread like wildfire through Company B. Within days, she went from the boss's favorite to public enemy number one. HR tried to spin it at first, claimed it was a misunderstanding, and that they were cooperating fully. But that died fast once the police raided her house and pulled out the antique set she swore she never touched. When the case went to court, I got a call from the prosecutor asking if I'd be willing to testify. I didn't even hesitate. Tell me when and where, I said. Sitting in that courtroom months later felt surreal. Witch looked nothing like the smug woman who used to strut through the office. Her hair was messy, her face pale, and her confidence was gone. She didn't even look at me when I took the stand. Maybe she knew she couldn't talk her way out of this one. The prosecutor asked me to walk through everything, how I handled the shipment, followed procedure, handed it to her, and got blamed. I told the truth, calmly, clearly, and with the same precision I used when I logged every piece of inventory. When they played the recording, her own voice bragging about stealing the set and sleeping with the manager, you could hear a pin drop. Her lawyer tried everything, said the confession was taken out of context, said she was under the influence and didn't mean it. The judge didn't buy it. When the verdict came in, I didn't even blink. Guilty. Theft over $5,000, fraud and obstruction. The judge gave her 5 years. She gasped, shouted that it was unfair, and tried to argue, but the bailiff was already leading her out. 5 years. It wasn't even close to what she deserved, but it was enough. Watching her get escorted out in cuffs was the first time I actually felt my shoulders relax in months. The aftermath hit Company B like a wrecking ball. The press got wind of the theft, the affair, and the internal cover-ups. Turns out Mike wasn't wrong. There had been plenty of scandal bubbling under the surface. When everything came out, clients pulled contracts, suppliers cut ties, and lawsuits piled up. Within 6 months, the company filed for bankruptcy. The manager didn't escape either. The DA said they couldn't prove his involvement beyond bad policy decisions and the affair, so no charges, just divorce and career collapse. His wife took the house, the car, and what little reputation he had left. His late nights at work finally caught up to him. The man who once looked down on me was now delivering packages for a living. Poetic doesn't even begin to cover it. As for Witch, her husband bailed, her family disowned her, and no company would touch her with a 10-foot pole. Every background check screamed her crimes. Even entry-level jobs didn't want her. Karma didn't just visit her, It moved in permanently. Meanwhile, life was good on my end. Company A thrived, and I was running the show smoothly. I built a solid team, trained new hires, and even helped expand into another branch. I didn't think about Witch much anymore. She was just an old scar, something I'd healed from but would never forget. 3 years later, after she was paroled, HR walked into my office holding a stack of resumes. Hey, they said, we've got a few applicants for the new logistics role. Mind taking a look? Sure, I said, flipping through them absently. And then my hand froze. There it was. Her name. Witch. Same last name. Same city. Same email. I actually laughed out loud. HR looked at me funny. Something wrong? No, I said, grinning. Actually, call her in for an interview. They raised an eyebrow. You sure? Yeah, I said, leaning back in my chair. This one's special. A week later, she showed up. I recognized her immediately, even though she looked like a completely different person. She walked in clutching a cheap purse, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. You could tell life had chewed her up and spat her out. She didn't see me at first. She was too focused on trying to look professional, probably rehearsing lines about how she'd changed. Then she looked up and froze. Her face drained of color. I smiled. Long time no see. For a few seconds, she just stood there, blinking like her brain was buffering. Then she stammered, You work here? Not exactly, I said. I run this department. Her eyes went wide. This isn't funny. Oh, I agree, I said, flipping through her resume like it was the most boring thing I'd ever read. You've had quite the career path since we last worked together. Oh, wait. No, you haven't. She clenched her fists. You ruined my life, I chuckled. No, you did that all by yourself. That's when she snapped. She lunged toward the table, knocking over a stack of papers and spilling a cup of water onto the floor. You think you're better than me? You were jealous. You've always been jealous. HR froze mid-step. I just sat there, calm as ever, watching her unravel. I sighed, pretending I was bored. You might want to leave before you add public meltdown to your list of career achievements. She glared at me, breathing hard, eyes full of rage and humiliation. For a second, I thought she might actually throw something, but instead, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The room went silent for a beat. HR finally exhaled. What was that? I smiled, leaned back in my chair, and said, That was closure. Watching her walk away for the last time felt like the final page of a story that had dragged on for years. No shouting, no dramatic speeches, just quiet satisfaction. She'd built her entire career on lies, manipulation, and ego. And now all that was left of her was a resume nobody wanted and a temper she couldn't control. Revenge doesn't always need fireworks. Sometimes it's just watching someone face the consequences they tried so hard to escape. And in that moment, seeing her storm out of my office, I realized something simple. I didn't just win. I moved on. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.